so I'm going to go back to reading an individual hive. All right, we've talked about building up commercial levels and everything, but I'm going to go back to reading an individual hive. I believe strongly in reading the beehive, or asking the beehive, asking the bees. Yeah, my girls are pretty precious to me, and I like to treat a beehive independently. All the queens, I believe, have got different personalities. So yeah, I do try and keep that level of personal relationship between each beehive, even though I've got about 50 or 60 of them. So some of the things I do is, apart from being prepared for my visit, then once I've opened my beehive up, I look at them and I start looking at the brood, I start looking at the hive itself, the population, is there eggs, is there larvae, all those things we do when we open up a hive. But then I will ask them, what will they be doing in my time between my next visits? And that's going to play very seasonally, all right? I'm then going to ask them, what do I want them to be doing? I'm going to ask them, what can I do to help my bees between my next visit? And I'm one of those people where the wine glass is half empty, and I'm going to be saying, what can go wrong? So let's look at our seasons. Now, it was brought up earlier that where you live regionally can be different for our beekeeping management practices. But I'll give you an example. Driving from the airport in Auckland to central Auckland itself, there was a degree of 4 degrees different. And that itself is going to be a different management for South Auckland to Central Auckland. I kept bees on Waiheke for a short time, and I noticed that everything started 1 month earlier over there. I always say to beekeepers when they come to our courses, oh, you poor people, if you live in the Waitaks, or the Waitakaries, West Auckland, you're 1 degree colder and you get the most rainfall. So some of the first things I do is, like most of us, after a few years, we've been keeping beekeeping records. And weather patterns even play a part in your beekeeping. Understanding what the food sources are, and understanding your climate changes that can happen to adapt your beekeeping yourself to your hives. So asking them what they'll be doing in the time between my next visit in spring to summer, what do? They build up. We hope if we've got everything right, there's going to be more brood patterns. Hopefully they go from 3 brood patterns to 5 to 10, etc. So to answer that, what do I want my bees to be doing? Maybe I want my bees to be doing honey collection, but mainly in spring I want them to be building up in brood numbers. So I need to make sure in my beekeeping that what I can do to help my bees between my next visit is make sure they've got an area that they can actually lay brood, the queen can lay brood in. Another thing that can happen in spring though is it can be really, really wet. So I actually still need to make sure that they've got food. And what food is coming in? Have I left them enough food for a rainy day? Weight is a really good thing on a wet day if you can't come back the next day. The other thing is, of course, the varroa treatments. We're going to keep ramming about those varroa treatments because this is the time to do that. And that's what could go wrong. So I'm worried about their food sources. I'm worried that if I don't give the queen some brood area to lay in, what could go wrong? She could swarm. And that's 50% of my bees gone. So I'm always thinking before or planning ahead. So as I've finished the day, I'm also writing down what I want to do the next time I visit. Maybe I need to make sure I bring another box, or I've got to remove that varroa treatment. Everything is what can I do? And of course, in the different times of the seasons is going to be different times of my visiting apiary. So in my summer, my spring-summer, I'm visiting every 2 weeks if my queen is over 1 season old. So my plan might be to re-queen then, and we're going to talk about queens later, because a new season queen is less likely to swarm. But if you're a hobbyist, you get very, very sentimental about your queens. And you want to keep them for those 3 years. Well, if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that your management practice is visiting every 10 days to make sure there is no queen cells appearing. So I've got a shorter frame of my visit. In the autumn, winter months though, my autumn is going from 1 month, and in my winter months, I'm only visiting an apiary 1 month to 6 weeks. If I've got everything prepared, they've got their food, they're warm, everything's going to be all right because I'm planning that for between my next visit. So really start looking yourself at what you want your bees to be doing as well. So perhaps I want my bees to be building up to do a spring pollination. So I actually have to start thinking about that in winter. How can I build them up to do that pollination of the fruit trees? The next one would be, maybe I want to get that crop of Manuka honey. So you're going to actually have to stimulate your bees so you have your flying bees to go and collect that early crop. And we know that at different regions of the country, the Manuka comes in flower at different times. So you need to know what your area is, and that's just one crop of honey. I'm just going to move on now to health, pests and diseases that affect our hive, because these are a lot of things that can go wrong with a beehive. So what is a healthy hive? Is it that? That lovely varroa mite that we see? Is it that there's bees, full stop? Is it, we've seen brood? Or is it, well, there's food for them? There's actually a lot more than that. So we need to remember a healthy colony. A healthy colony is going to be the future of your healthy beehive. All right, so you've got to make sure that that colony, the area where the brood is always that 34 degrees. And we've also got to remember that heat rises. And particularly at this time of year, newish beekeepers think they're doing the right thing by having one brood box and a box of honey on top, right? Because they don't want them to starve. But the problem is the brood box is down here, and there's no bees covering the honey box up the top. The bees covering the brood are warming as much as they can, and the heat is just keeping the honey box warm. So you've really got to start reading your hive regards what bees are where, and where is the brood, and where is the heat for that brood. So maybe you need to close your hive down more. And of course we go to site placement. I've seen beehives floating down the river and out to sea. All right? Have we got them positioned right? All right, it's really important that, are they facing the windiest side? What can we do to prevent them losing that heat loss? Is the colony dry? Lids on correctly? The angle of the hive, it's got to be at the angle that the worst of the rain and everything isn't actually going to go into the beehive, it needs to come out of the beehive. And the floor directly on the ground again. Damp rises, and that damp can then start harbouring viruses and funguses to start growing in a hive, which the bees then have to control and try and survive against. And there's no holes in the woodware. That's vital going into autumn. We don't want all that robbing. We don't want to be encouraging wasps. We don't want to be encouraging robbing from other hives. And of course, the dreaded one, bees being affected by pests and diseases. So of course you can see this one down in the bottom corner. It wasn't level. All right, so positioning is really, really important. So signs of ill health. That's going to be activity at the entrance of a hive. It's going to be dead bees at the entrance of the hive as well, remembering though that drones are escorted out of the hive in autumn. It's going to be hive population. Is there a sudden change to that? It's going to be brood patterns. Are they becoming spotty? What's the reason for that? Patterns, bee behaviour as well. So all that, whenever I visit my beehive or an apiary, I actually do a walk around the perimeter, or about up to a metre to 2 metres away from the hive. And I'll give you an example why I do that, because at one apiary I've got what's called Death Valley. So particularly in autumn I can go there and I can walk 1 or 2 metres away and I'll see my crawling deformed winged bees, or my adult bees covered with varroa. They're removing themselves from the hive because they know they're not healthy and they're affecting the health of the hive, so off they go to die. That's where I'm finding them. That's my first sight of call. And then of course, the entrance. Is there pollen coming in? We know when pollen comes in, there's a queen laying. So start thinking of those things even when you are visiting an apiary. Problems in the hive? Problems in the brood is going to lead to long-term results in the adult bee numbers. And this is really, really important from February onwards. So a lot of us do our varroa treatment then. It's really important that we get our varroa numbers down, because the brood cycles then of the bees being produced are the ones that are going to make the hive survive in winter. They're the ones that are going to live 4 to 5 months. So they need to be healthy. And it's no good waiting until May to put your varroa treatments in and then hoping that those bees are going to be healthy, because by that time your varroa numbers are so high. And a lot of the adult bees are leaving, they're at the end of their 6 weeks. So the brood area, as I mentioned before, needs to always be at 34 degrees. And the adult bees will always cover them, as you can see in this photo. But they need to generate heat, of course, so they need to have healthy wings. There comes that deformed wing virus again if it's starting to appear in autumn. They're not going to be able to generate that heat. We can also see sudden disappearances of adult bees over the brood. That might be due to toxic effects and other threats, such as wasps. And they're trying to defend the hive, and so that those adult bee numbers are being reduced as well. Then they can't effectively cover the brood. So you're not going to get your brood emerging. Autumn, I really do see a lot of losses going on. It's important that we get in there early and fix those situations. I'll just very quickly, starved brood, these are non-infectious things that can affect the brood. That's because there's normally a shortage of food. Again, these things can happen very quickly in spring. So we need to make sure that the recipe's right. And you'll learn that recipe as you start reading your bees and you start reading your environment. The other thing can happen, we actually can get overheated brood. And that's due because we've lost a lot of workers. Or again, those deformed wing viruses are catching up with our bees. So the brood isn't, in the height of summer, isn't being chilled enough, or the air conditioning's not going on in the hive. Chilled bees, we can often see this in spring. This is when the adults are cold and they form a cluster. So the hive's been too open, close them up. If it's Only 4 frames of bees in the winter. Don't keep them in a 9-frame box. You can keep them in a 9-frame box, close them down to 5 and stuff some hessian in the other side so they don't have to keep those 9 frames warm. Starving bees can actually be seen if they've used up all their stores, or if you've been feeding syrup and then you stop, start. If you start feeding syrup, you've got to keep going until there's a nectar flow on. So starving bees will have their heads into the cells, and starving bees actually become cannibals and they start eating the eggs as well. So then you get complete collapse of the hive. Poisoning, of course, we're all very worried about poisoning. And what you do see is the bees may not return to the hive, and of course the other factors like the brood start being affected. Now I very quickly want to remind you of the groups that we have here. So this is my very quick presentation here. We've got endemic effects. These are things that are already here. We've got those wasps that are affecting our bees. We've got ants. Now the black ants aren't so bad, but the red ants can actually spread viruses through the hive. They can spread sac brood virus through the hives. So maybe we need to consider what we're doing. Rats and mice, manage for that. Put those entrance reducers on. Store our gear properly. Don't encourage them. Don't leave wax lying around on the ground to encourage the rats to come and be near. Greater wax moth and lesser wax moth there here. Sac brood virus. Now if you keep ahead of your varroa, hopefully you don't see this virus come out, but often we do. Chalk brood is another one. We see this more in spring with our damp, horrible, wet hives. Keep them warm. Half moon syndrome, Nosema's. We've got a few Nosema's here now. That's bee diarrhea, basically. And of course that varroa. I cannot emphasise enough. Keep ahead of varroa. And for myself with varroa mite, I'm just going to quickly say that I actually treat 3 or 4 times a year, depending what I'm using. So I start in autumn with maybe my chemical treatment because I want to have the biggest kill rate. But during the winter months, I'll use some of the other treatments like oxalic acids and things like that. And then I'll go into a nice spring treatment, and hopefully I've got the varroa numbers down to 1%. You know, I'm really wanting the varroa number to drop as much as possible. So I'm doing it through winter with lots of different, you must alternate your treatments. And don't rely on one, and always monitor your result after your treatment. So these ones are also here as well. We've got these viruses. I think we've got 11 of the 18 viruses in New Zealand. Then you should always also be aware of the exotic threats. And if you don't know what they are, it's these ones here. And they could arrive on our doorstep any time, especially because of our free trade and our imports and everything else. If you want to understand more about them, because I'm not going to go into it, there's a GIA stand down there and they can help you out. But to give you an idea, varroa was discovered by a hobbyist and a commercial on basically the same day. So you might be the one to discover it. And if we get onto it quickly enough, we can hopefully eliminate it before it gets any further. So in New Zealand, we're really lucky that we are islands away from immediate threats. Therefore, we have the opportunity of keeping exotic diseases, parasites, and foreign bees from entering our country. So always, my line here is always support that. Don't bring anything in. Support strong biosecurity is the way for our future, to keep our bees, and we've got some of the healthiest bees around the world, keep them healthy. We all know about the reportable disease, or at least you should. Okay, so American foul brood. If you aren't sure about it, or you want an update, or you want to be reminded, and there goes their eyesight again, afb.org.nz. And there's an app that you can download as well onto your phone, so when you're out in the field and you're not sure, it's through the Play Store or Apple. I think they've got a different one. But download it onto your phone, it's right there. So going into that, I'm always on the precaution, okay? I'm always trying to be prepared. So, know what you're looking for on a brood frame. Learn, all right? That's the very first thing you can do. Always investigate your brood frame. So always investigate chewed cappings. You know, I mentioned before the break that I have matches. Well, you can use a twig or a stick out in the field if you need to, but always investigate those chewed cappings. Don't investigate a couple of them and assume that it's sac brood. Right? It could be other things happening as well. Or investigate and you assume it's varroa. Heal the hive of varroa and then check again. So spotty brood patterns, until they disappear, keep checking them. The AFB requirements, we know that there's an annual disease return to be filled out 1st of June. There's approved beekeeper paperwork that's to be returned 30th of November. Right, it can get very confusing. Your DECA agreements, all very confusing. If you aren't understanding it, go and see the Assure Quality and the AFB PMP stands downstairs and they can explain it. But your legal obligations is to, I'm going to remind you, to register all apiaries, all beehives. To kill and destroy a beehive colony affected by visual signs of AFB, and to report it, and you're actually going to do it twice. You're going to do it when you find it, and you're going to do it when you do your ADR, your annual disease return. But you also need to, I'm just going to remind you, you also need to let them know if there's robbing signs or dead outs. And you've seen the dead out with AFB. Because that information then, we're going to let other beekeepers know in the area that their bees, that there's the risk of them actually having sourced an AFB hive. I just very quickly want to go into practical preventative methods to eliminate AFB. And these are not only, these to eliminate AFB in your area, or even to reduce the risk of 10 beehives getting AFB down to 1 beehive, if that's the beehive that's sourced an AFB infected hive. The first thing is, if you've looked at your spotty brood frames and you're still not sure, don't leave the hive to die out, right? Get a second opinion. Don't leave the hive to be robbed out as well, all right? Very sensible stuff. Don't abandon the hive, you know. It's better to destroy or put it away safely somewhere, then start again with that hive and put some bees in it. The other thing is don't add new gear or don't start spreading the gear out all over the place. Really, really keep that unit as a unit. And of course there's always other beekeepers that can come along if you're not sure. And we know that there is a free sampling that you can do through the agency as well. So there's other things I always practice. I practice our keeping of records. And record keeping, as we heard earlier, can help you progress in your beekeeping. And as I've mentioned before, it can help you establish what happens in your area. But it also is going to, if you've seen a spotty brood pattern, you go down a couple of weeks later, you've addressed varroa, but you're still seeing some spotty brood patterns or perforations. Maybe you've replaced your queen now and it's just still performing that bit. Start looking, and it's recorded on your paperwork. And of course, we're very aware that it's legal, your legal obligation is to inspect an apiary or your brood area twice a year, minimum. But if you're ever removing something from a hive, you're doing a split or an increase, or you're even taking your honey off, check the brood area again, unless you can guarantee that that box of honey you've taken off is going to go back to that beehive, and maybe you're going to check it in 2 weeks' time. But you can very, very quickly spread AFB if you don't do that one thing of checking that brood again. So time management. It's important. At different times of the year, you're going to need more time on a beehive than other times of the year. So how to record? Yes, we've heard you can have a diary isn't perhaps the best thing. I use an exercise book. I use accounting books. There's a very detailed record sheet per beehive that you can download from the Auckland Bee Club's website. there's apps now downstairs. I think there's about 4 different companies down there with Hive apps that you can use. But I really, really can't emphasise enough keeping some kind of record. And then there's things you can do which is practical, like marking your hiveware. You can keep this hiveware together by frames. So for instance, going back to that one there, those frames, can you spot the odd one out? So I immediately know that I've got a frame from somewhere else. That box is meant to be all blue. Excuse me. Hiveware, you can see my little pretty example there, where all that hiveware is kept together and the other hive next to it is marked differently. So you can use things like, for frames I use nail polish, if it's plastic. Excuse me, and you can just see some of you using pink and gold and sparkly stuff, but something that you can mark those frames to that beehive, or those beehive boxes to that beehive. You can then start setting it up as an apiary if you want to set it up as an apiary, or even as far as an area. So you're getting to the stage where you've got 500 hives. That day you go and harvest all your honey off apiary 5, 10 and 9. 5, 10 and 9, have the supers go back into those apiaries. It doesn't matter if it goes back onto 5, 10 and 9 and some 9 goes on to 5, but you know that you're got them going back into the area. So start that now rather than later. Yep. So this includes dead outs. So excuse me. So if I have a dead out, I actually leave the lid on the floor there. And then the boxes, I know where they've come from, and I can put them back into that apiary. And when I've finished beekeeping for the day, I always leave the apiary clean. I've seen far too many these days that are leaving their strips lying on the ground, covered in wax, covered in honey. Just go around and clean up after yourself. The wax, the propolis, everything is usable from a beehive. They're all products from the hive, so clean them up. So my disease prevention for you would be, although it's not always possible to prevent the occurrence of disease and pests, the beekeeper can endeavour to keep their bees in the best possible condition. So start from the beginning, put some of your hive management in practice, because you're learning from your bees and from your environment what they need, what they require, and what you want them to be needing and require. And you need to ensure that the colony is regularly inspected and manipulated. All right, so real practical beekeeping. Seek advice on legal requirements. So if you're not sure, go and visit the Assure Quality stand, go and visit the MPI stand. Food handling. A lot of you as hobbyists, you can actually, when you're extracting your honey, to sell it, instead of having to get the big food handling certificate, you can have a honey handling certificate. So that's been made just for beekeepers who are producing honey. Seek that advice from the Food Safety Government website as well. Right? And always be ahead of Tootin as well. Learn about Tootin if you haven't learnt about that. Downstairs is the opportunity to do that. So one of the other things that is important is you should be placing your beekeeper ID somewhere. On the beehives or on a site assigned by your beehives. I'm not going to ask you to put up your hands of who actually does that, but that's one thing you should be doing. And that's me. So, very quick. So we keep on time.
All right, the next next part of the presentation is pretty interactive, and that I'm going to ask you questions. and you're going to get to ask me questions. Now, I've got one thing. I'll grab some notes though, briefly. If I ask you a question, you can yell back the answer, okay, and that's all good. However, if you want to ask me a question, you've got to have a mic, which Paul is going to run to you, all right? So what we're going to discuss, the last part of the presentation, is just basically 4 areas, quickly. Heavy motor vehicles, so I'm going to cover that quite quickly because it's a bit technical and it's not necessarily everyone's thing. Going to cover off splits and nukes, briefly. We're going to cover off drone layers, and then I'm going to talk about risk mitigation, which is really what perhaps a lot of you should be interested in relation to if you're going into commercial, we're just stumbling in without realising it or deliberately going into it. It's one of the things you really want to be considering before you get there to avoid issues along the way. So let's kick off with heavy motor vehicles. Anyone give me a definition of what a heavy motor vehicle is? Someone? Over 3,500 kgs, all right? So if you're driving a vehicle which is 3,500 kgs or more, it's a heavy motor vehicle. And as a result, you need a specific heavy traffic licence, and you need logbooks, etc., depending on issues, all right? So if you have for example, most utes are about 2,000 kg. If I've got an Navara ute, it's about 2,000 kg. If I was to put 1,100 kg onto the ute, I'm now driving a heavy motor vehicle, and I'm subject to the rules and regulations governing heavy motor vehicles. Right? What's common is to have utes up to about 2,500 kg, if I had a 600 kg load, it's very common, if we transport syrup around Poole all the time, 600 kg is there easily. If I bang that onto my 2,500 kg ute, which is just a bigger Ford ute or something, I'm over heavy motor vehicle limits, aren't I? What can I do to avoid having to comply with all the regulations, etc.? Anyone doing it? Anyone know what to do? Yell it out to me.
Put a trailer on the back.
Good man. Put a trailer on the back. Then the only weight you're restricted by is the weight of the tow bar on your draw bar adding to your vehicle weight. And if I was to put a 600 kg, you're going to need a microphone. I'm going to ask me a question. Paul, run that man a microphone.
I'm just going to say, make sure you don't overload it, mate.
He just said make sure you don't overload it. Essentially, so the weight of your heavy motor vehicle in this case is going to be the weight of your vehicle plus the weight the drawbar is putting on your vehicle, but it won't be 600 kg because most of that 600 kg is on the axles of your trailer, which is a separate vehicle. So there are ways of getting around it, and if you're going to get into commercial beekeeping, think about these things. Don't go out and buy a flash truck and have a huge expense straight away if you don't need it. The other thing is, it's much, much more versatile to have a trailer and a decent four-wheel drive ute than it is to have a truck and try and do all the same things with one vehicle. Okay? I have kept bees commercially for many years with a 4x4 ute and a trailer, the old standard 8x4 trailer, whatever. No worries, or much better. Okay? So don't think I've got to get all this flash gear to go commercial. You do not have to do that. What you do have to do and should do is think what's going to best suit your particular operation. If you do end up going a heavy motor vehicle, then rather than list your whole lot of facts and figures and things, go to the LTNZ website and it's all listed there for you. There's so many regulations governing dimensions and axle weights, everything else. It'd just be pointless me trying to talk you all through them today. But I do want to cover up a couple of other things. Once you're up there, once you're driving a heavy motor vehicle, remember you have to then maintain logbooks and things. So if you have staff out there working all day and then they have a 6-hour or 3-hour or whatever drive, that's all part of it, okay? And they're likely to exceed their hours because that work you had them doing in the hives is part of their working day and it adds as a cumulative onto driving hours. So driving hours aren't just physically driving, okay? So there's all sorts of issues arise around heavy motor vehicles. Best if you can to avoid them, if at all possible. The most common mistakes we find relating to heavy motor vehicles, poor loading, especially trailers. If you're towing a trailer, which I'd encourage most of you to do, put all the weight closest to your vehicle, not towards the back of the trailer, okay? Whatever you do, you don't want your weight at the rear end of the trailer. What happens is the trailer starts fishtailing all over the road very quickly and you lose control. And we've all seen that down the road. Someone has a really long load of timber off their back of the trailer, whatever, and you see all the big tyre friction marks from the road and it's upside down somewhere. That's because the weight was behind the axle towards the back of the thing, right? If it's forward of the axle towards your motor vehicle that's towing it, then that won't occur. So, and that's particularly important when we're carrying a lot of boxes, especially the ones full of honey. If you put your honey boxes at the back of the trailer and your empty boxes at the front, you're going to have real problems. All your weight in the trailers, right at the front, right? All your bulk that's not weighty at the back. Save yourself a lot of grief. Ask me how I know. Inadequate protection for operators and other people in the vicinity. The other problem we have motor vehicles and things is they tend to involve more than one person. And often we have people who are helping us or whatever, and we don't think about their protection. We don't think about the forecourt attendant when we go and fill up. All those sort of people who are subject to the bees that we're carrying around with us. Okay, so once you get into bigger vehicles which hold more people, etc., consider the personal protective requirements of everyone involved. But probably the biggest issue, and I face it in my other role, is what happens when all goes wrong. And what happens if you have an accident, a crash. If you're towing or have bees on board, a heavy motor vehicle particularly, and you have a crash, what's going to happen? Let's say you do have you lose control, you spill your bees all over the road, etc. Are the emergency services going to turn up? Yes, they are. Where are they going to turn up? Quite some way away, for obvious reasons, all right? So what they're going to do is establish a cordon at quite some distance, a safe distance away from your crash. So who's going to be responsible for sorting you out? You. Absolutely. Unless you're incapacitated, you are going to be sorting you out. And that's where we all fall down. How many people have moved bees without even thinking about that? Lots of us. Okay. So before we move bees, we need an emergency plan. And that plan can be as simple as having the phone numbers of other beekeepers in your phone, having your personal protective equipment in the cab with you, not on the back of the truck, having spare boxes or somewhere where people can go and get them. Because the procedure for a crash like that is other beekeepers have to come in, the fire brigade and all the police and the public stay well away and kept away. Other beekeepers come in, they pick up the frames and bees they can, rehouse them into boxes, strap them up and take them away. Everything else is hosed down into the ditch side of the road and killed. Okay? That is the procedure. That's the only way it really works. So next time, before you consider moving hives and things, please think through the implications of going wrong. Don't ever think it won't happen to me. You could be the best driver in the world, and Bryce Horner comes along and hits you. Okay? It's not up to you. It's up to every other Wally on the road. And so you must have a plan. If you have no plan and you have a crash, you can expect to get a whopping big invoice from the emergency services for all the extra work, etc., that they had to do. Okay, if you've put no consideration into it, you're the one carrying the dangerous goods, if you like. So please put a bit of thought into that aspect of it. The other thing is plan your route. I don't know how many times I've seen bees or trucks carrying bees or trailers carrying bees parked in the forecourt of a gas station, petrol station, or parked outside of takeaways, or parked outside someone's house, for goodness sake. Right? Plan, fill up your vehicle, take extra fuel if required, use an after-hours thing with an automatic pump with no, don't take stops in towns. Plan routes that avoid those sort of problems, please. That would be very helpful and cause us a lot less stress. Another one is understanding your vehicle. If you're going to be a beekeeper commercially, then you're going to be keeping hives on other people's properties usually, and you're going to be driving over a variety of terrain. The quality of that terrain varies considerably over time, and you'll need generally a 4x4 vehicle. Okay, people who are urban beekeepers, you get away with that one, but most of us are going to need one. And the issue is if you don't have a decent vehicle that's capable of doing that, come spring, for example, you get a wet spring, your hives are starving and you can't get that vehicle in there to feed your hives, it will wipe you out. You'll lose those bees. So one of the considerations that I was faced earlier on, because I didn't have a decent vehicle, and I started to suffer hive losses and things because I hadn't thought through the requirement to get food to bees when required. Okay, so it's okay if you've got an urban operation. Kim sounds like she probably could get over the family station wagon or whatever, but there is, oh yeah, four-wheel drive truck. But most of you won't if you've got any highs or any numbers, okay? So think about a vehicle that's appropriate for your operation and is capable of getting across the terrain that's required. Also, if you're buying a truck and you've got staff using it, make sure they're trained to use it and they know the limitations of it. Trucks don't go around the sides of hills very well, don't go across small flimsy farm bridges very well, culverts, etc. Okay? So make sure that what the vehicle's being used for, the vehicle is fit for purpose essentially, for what you intend to use it for. Yeah, so that's been a lot of problems. I covered that very quickly, just pointing out some of the highlights essentially because it's one of the things that it's more technical field than anything else, but I did want to highlight the issues in it face. You have any questions? Yeah, where's Paul gone? He's run away. Can you run that microphone to the back there, Paul? That's just a fast walk at best.
Good afternoon. I was under the impression that if you moved live hives of bees around the countryside these days, you had to have a mesh cover over them. Is that applies, does it?
So the question is, are you required to have a mesh cover over your bees when you move them? And I think what you may be referring to is what you used to call a travel screen, which is more to do with ensuring the bees didn't asphyxiate, didn't die of overheating. You're meant to block your bees in because they are a dangerous good essentially, but there's no specific requirement saying how you are to do that. Okay. Now, in the bad old days, we used to move them at night and not even bother closing them in, which is all very good until the move went on longer than anticipated. We had a breakdown or whatever. But yes, that screen you're referring to is probably what we used to call a travel screen. So we used to take the hive lid off a hive, the hive mat off the hive, and put a specialised hive mat on.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with those.
Okay.
But no, these were sort of made out of like a fly wire mesh, like a plastic cover that went right over the whole load of bees hives that were on the back of a truck or a trailer. I understood that was what you had to do.
It's not a legal requirement as far as I know at this point.
Thank you very much for answering your question.
Best thing for that is
Well, just a minute, Paul's getting to you.
the best thing to cover those is a good old garden mesh that you have around the garden, the green stuff.
Yep.
You can make that up, put it over the hive. I use it all the time. I've got an open hive, open ute. Use it all the time. Put a green screen over it, tie it down the bottom of the strap, 100%.
This is after taking the mat and the lid off?
I never take them off.
Okay. Yep.
I leave them on because you put your guard on the front, your wasp guard on the front there, tip it up the right way, it'll vent, air's going in there, it's going in all the time, and you never have any problem. That's what I use.
Yeah, and that's how 99% of hives be moved, simply.
When you were talking about bees and accidents, I was involved with one at Paddingtonga at north of Napier, when the choker opened the door when he was carting bees, truck and trailer, through to Gisborne, and he happened to open the door out the back.
Yep.
You've never seen such a mess because the driver didn't have a bee suit.
Yeah. I remember that one.
You remember that one? Yeah.
And who's liable there?
Hey?
Who's liable there?
Yeah, dead right.
Okay.
Now, I always have 3 suits. My own suit, a spare suit, and a sleeve suit with a hat on.
Yes.
If anyone's got a help, at least you can chuck something at them.
Yeah, that's a bit of good advice, that.
Yeah.
Have spare suits in your cab. That incident he's referring to was a truck driver who was transferring with the hives, wasn't he?
Well, I am a truck driver and I know what carting bees because I cart a lot north with them.
Yeah.
And that's a good protection. Always carry extra suits.
Yep.
You know, only $100, but boy, they can save you $50,000.
Yeah. Getting stung is not a laugh to someone who's allergic. It really isn't. So, yeah. Any other questions relating to transport?
Could I just make one comment, Bryce?
Yep.
There have been some nasty accidents with people shifting bees when their trucks have either tipped over or they've tipped hives off, and some beekeepers have got trapped in their cabs and have been terribly stung. What my policy's been, and I think probably everybody should do it, is when you're shifting bees, always be prepared, always wear your suit. Doesn't matter how well you think you've strapped your hives on, if you've got your suit on, and I've had hives fall off, and you've got to hop out on a road pretty quick and get it off the road. If you've got your suit on and all you've got to do is zip your hood up, you're halfway there. But if you haven't got it on, you're going to make a decision. Do you grab that hive and jump round? And my suggestion is you always wear your suit. Yep.
Yes, if I could just make a comment on my background with insurance. If you do employ people, even if they arrived for the interview at home, do not assume they have a driver's license. You need to cite it and take a photocopy of it, because if they transgress the rules, you are liable. It's a health and safety issue too. For example, going down the road and they cause an accident, it's on you, not them, because they're an unlicensed driver. They could be prosecuted for driving as unlicensed, but it's on you as the employer. You need to check to have a driver's license. And if you have a transient, shall we say, transient workforce, it might pay to have a copy of that driver's license every year, even if they're with you several years.
Yeah, I reinforce that actually. My other vocation, we take driver's licenses off people and they continue to drive for their employer because they don't want to tell them they have lost their license, and we end up taking the vehicle off them, and you'll lose your vehicle. So if you're employing someone who doesn't have a current driver's license, just because they simply haven't told you and they're caught driving your vehicle, you lose the vehicle depending on the offence they've committed. So normally the requirement is you have a process where you check driver status at regular intervals for employees. Okay, I'm going to talk about drone layers quickly. Does everyone know what a drone layer is? Someone tell me what a drone layer is. Sorry? Yeah, but who's a drone layer? Sorry? A queen who's run out of semen. That's one of the drone layers. Yep, there's more than one type of drone layers. Yep. A worker. What type of worker? A laying worker. What's a laying worker managed to achieve? She's developed functional ovaries. Okay, so those are the two characteristics. So a drone layer is either a worker who's developed functional ovaries and started laying, or a queen who's run out of semen. Now, she may have run out of semen because she is old and simply used it all up, and she's Kim's favourite, and she's so sexually attached to it that she never let it go after 3 years. Or it might be she was poorly mated in spring. Here's this mating in spring, autumn controversy we discuss. Or for any reason along those lines. Or it could be that the queen's pheromone levels will drop off, or you've just got a rogue worker who's developed functional ovaries. And that occurs. There are, in fact, bees whose job is to go around the hive and hunt down and kill drone-laying workers who develop functional ovaries and think they're going to start laying. Okay? And funnily enough, there are bees who do that for a job, for a point of time in the hive. So that's a drone layer, right? And they can occur at any time. And they're not perhaps as uncommon as you might think. So what are the symptoms? Anyone know some symptoms of drone layers? What would you see in a hive? What would you want to see and recognise? Yep. Drone brood. No, not per se, but you go on. I think you're on the right lines. Keep going. How would you... Yeah. What three types of cells do we get in hives? The queen cells, drone cells, worker cells. Okay. But if you saw a whole lot of drone cells, would you be suspicious? No. Not so much. Let me trust me on this one. Not so much. When would you be suspicious? Let me give you a hint. What? Bingo. Good man. Okay. So when you're seeing drone cappings, the big dome ones on worker cells, there you have a drone layer. All right. So here's someone laying unfertilised eggs in worker cells. So a queen, when she wants to lay a drone, goes and measures the cell, checks, makes sure it's been polished and cleaned out, and inverts herself with her long abdomen and lays an unfertilised egg at the base of the cell, stuck on the bottom. Okay, which she can do because she's got that big long abdomen, hasn't she? So when a worker comes to lay, who's a rogue and sneaking around trying to lay eggs, where does she lay her eggs? On the sides. Well done, people. Because why? She can't reach down the bottom, mate. Okay, so there's one of the symptoms. You've got single or multiple eggs laid on the side of cells, particularly worker cells. Another symptom is you've got those domed drone caps on worker cells and not on drone cells where they belong. So those are the two most common symptoms that you've got a drone worker, and when, a drone layer. And when you've got a drone layer, a good one, you'll just see dozens and dozens of worker cells with drone caps on. And that good solid laying pattern is more indicative of a queen who's run out of semen than a worker who's developed functional ovaries. The workers who's developed functional ovaries, they tend to be more haphazard because they're running for their life often and try not to be so much noticed. But a queen who's run out of semen it is often a good solid laying pattern. So those are drone layers. They're not that common, but they're common enough. And the cure for them is, shout out someone? Requeen. Okay, simply requeening sorts that problem out, doesn't it? Now, how do we requeen? If we have a drone laying queen, we can probably just track her down and pinch her and get rid of her. Let's say we've got a drone laying worker. Yeah, you're looking forever. Okay, just requeen, and generally what happens, the pheromones in your queen will sort that out for you. Okay, so it's basically the things are different, is the same. What you really don't want to do, what's important not to do, is requeen with a cage queen when you have an existing queen in there who's run out of semen. Right? The reason we requeen with cells is that so a virgin who's a fit, lethal fighter comes out and kills off the old queen, isn't it? That's why we're using cells, because the expectation is she will kill the old fat girl. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but she will kill mum, all right? Because she's fit and lethal. But if you've got, and I excuse my terminology again, two fat girls fighting, it gets to be an ugly sort of scene, right? And the outcome is uncertain. So if you have a drone-laying queen, don't replace that with a cage queen until you've squashed her. And if you can't find her and squash her, put a queen cell in there. That make sense? Okay, so there's your drone layers sorted out. They're not a big issue, but they'll happen every now and again. And probably the first thing you'll really see is just a lot of drone domed caps on worker brood. It's not a disease, it's not a parasite, and it's not a huge problem. Splits and nukes. A lot of people talk, we've already touched on splits and nukes a few times, and we've of course assumed you knew what we're talking about, and that may not necessarily be the case. What's the difference between a split and a nuke? Someone tell me? Split's a whole split. So what's a whole split? Pretend I'm really stupid because you'd be close. So what? Yep, you're on the right track. So what do I start with? So I'm starting with 2 full depth brood boxes, and a split is take 1 box off and leave them with 2. Okay, so that's a split essentially, and we'll talk more about it in a minute. What's a nuke? Someone else give me an answer for what's a nuke? I'm going to pick on someone in a minute.
I usually do 5 frames.
5 frames?
5 frames.
So what do those 5 frames go into?
Into the little box you got on the top there.
Oh, thanks, Kim.
Little 5 frames.
Okay, so a nuke hive is a specialist small hive. It has the same dimensions as usually full depth frames, but it's about half the width, isn't it? And you put, instead of splitting 1 box away from 2 boxes, you actually take frames out of a box and put them into a separate one. Okay, that's the difference between splits and nukes.
And it has a queen.
Sorry?
And you usually have a queen in it.
Oh, you've got to put a queen in it. Yeah. Well, you don't have to. You can hope that they raise their own, but you're right. Yeah.
With a split, sometimes you can get away with.
I'm just going to get Paul to jog over there. Oh, he's getting really lazy. There he is.
No, it's not his fault. And with the split, you don't always have to have a queen in it. You can set it up so that the bees will produce their own queen cell, and they've got a queen cell in. That's my interpretation of a split anyway.
Yeah, statistically not a good option though, really.
And with splits, sometimes you use a tin bottom board, and you can put it up and have the entrance to the split up out to one of the sides of the hive.
Are you talking about splitting a full box into 2? Yeah. Well, that's a combination. We'll talk about that briefly as well.
Yeah.
So what the gentleman just talked about is you can have essentially a full box and put a divider in the middle, and then call it 2 splits and have entrances either end, sort of thing. Okay, and that's what we call a combination. I was trying not to muddy the waters too much, But there you go. So essentially, we just think about, for the purpose of this presentation, a split being a complete box full of frames and bees, and a nuke being a smaller size box, dimensions similar to those ones, where we just put 5 frames in, 4 or 5 frames. So what I'm going to talk about now is, and because you're all going to want to do that, if you haven't already done it, and most of you will have already done it, and you might be doing it to varying degrees, and if you haven't done it, you're going to want to do it at some stage. So that's how we have increase, isn't it? That's how we get more hives. So what I want to talk to you about now and talk you through is how to make good ones. And the difference between good ones and poor ones is a commercial outcome for you eventually. So what are the characteristics of a good split? What is a good split? And good nukes for that matter, what do they contain? Well, first of all, they've got to contain adequate pollen in stores. Okay? So at its smallest, its barest, at a nuke if you like, if I usually have 5 framers, and one of those frames spaces is taken by a single frame feeder. Okay? The other 2 of the other 4, one is honey, right, from the parent hive, the hive you took the split from, and one is pollen, and often pollen honey. So you want the foods there immediately for the bees. Don't ever underestimate the importance of pollen. Everyone keeps thinking about honey as being really important. It's pollen that builds bees. Okay? Honey is the energy in which they use to fly. If you want to build baby bees, you need pollen in huge amounts of it. Okay? It's I think the most misunderstood thing about one of the most misunderstood things in beekeeping. Pollen is a protein, and all bees are built with it. No pollen, no baby bees. That's simple, right? Good, diverse range of supply of pollen is what you need. So, frame of in a nuke, frame of honey, frame of pollen, feeder in there as well. Okay, so you've got both. In a split, you're splitting off 2 boxes, and you'd hope that those 2 boxes are both full. Now, the fact is, 90% of the time, they're not evenly distributed. You haven't got the same amounts of brood in both, haven't got the same amounts of food in both. So what you need to do is split the boxes and then redistribute the food and brood in them to make them even, if you want to be even, and normally you would. And you also got to know where the queen is, of course. Okay, so your queen locating abilities need to be up there. So fundamentally, we need to ensure we have a good food supply. Clearly, the food supply in a split is significantly greater than the food supply in a nuke. All right, and we must be aware of that. And that's why at least we need a feeder in that nuke box. They must both contain numbers of bees, particularly nurse bees, good numbers, all right? So, and that's one of the fundamental problems I have. And if you particularly, because I buy a lot of bees for students, or make a lot of bees up for students' things. If you are buying splits or buying nukes off people, you should always inspect them. And one of the first things you want to do is make sure there are bees covering all those frames. Do not be accepting buying nukes and things where all those frames aren't covered by bees. When you make up a split yourself and you take your 2 frames of capped brood and put it in your frame of honey, in your frame of pollen, in your feeder, okay, then take additional frames of bees from the nurse, hopefully nurse bees from the brood box area, not the queen, shake them down till all your 4 frames are covered in bees. And that's really important. Okay? Why is it important we take them from the brood box area? Who are we targeting? Well done. You built nurse bees. Why do we want nurse bees? Because they're going to look after the attendant bees, essentially, that they are nurse bees. We'll look after the queen. So it's really important. Must we have good numbers of foraging bees? No. So if the priority is the nurse bees, they're the ones who are going to raise that young for you. You are feeding that nuke, aren't you? So in the meantime, you can get away without those large numbers of foraging bees. You do need older bees, because they do some other jobs as well, which are important. But the real importance is here to have large numbers of nurse bees, because they're going to look after the queen, the new queen you introduce her. If you don't have young bees with pharyngeal glands, your queen's going to die and your brood's not going to do very well. Okay, so it's the nurse bees you're after. So make sure you make up your food, your brood, and why is it capped brood, by the way, not uncapped brood? It's about to emerge. Yeah. What's the problem with putting uncapped brood in a nuke? You can't avoid it. There will be some there probably, but what's? No, not so much. But I'll discuss that in a minute. It's a good answer. It's not the one I wanted, but it's a good answer. Okay, what's the really good thing about having nothing but capped brood? Well done. Same man again. So if you've got cat brood, there's no feeding requirements, so there's no huge demand on those stores straight away. Those cat brood will emerge and they will immediately start working and etc. Right, and being available to nurse and to feed the queen. If you have a lot of uncapped brood in there, that brood is doubling its body mass every day essentially. It's being fed its own weight every day, and that's all stores coming from that one frame of honey and pollen you've got there. So if you can make sure you put 2 frames of cat brood in there as your starter, and you'll do all right. This gentleman here said don't put uncapped brood in because you might get emergency queen cells. This gentleman down the back would disagree because that's exactly what he wanted to do. And so what we're talking about is if you put a frame of uncapped brood in and there's no queen present, right, initially if there's a delay before you put the queen in, the hive will go into what they call the emergency response, where they'll try and raise a 1-day-old larvae to be a queen. Now, normally we make up a nuke and we put a queen in, either it be a cell or a caged queen. This gentleman likes to have them raise their own. So if you've got cat brood, then the cell or the caged queen's fine. If you wanted to take the chance that they'll raise their own, then you'd have to put some uncapped brood in there. Not just uncapped brood, but brood with frames with some eggs in, or 1-day-old larvae. Cool. Okay, so going characteristics, well fed. That applies to both nukes and to splits as well, because splits don't need the food immediately per se, but what does feeding do? It stimulates bees, right? So light feeding of a split is important, and constant feeding of a nuke is important, particularly when the queen's there. Feeding stimulates the hive to accept the queen, and feeding provides that constant food source for feeding brood when they turn up. Okay, so feeding is really important. Well protected. There's nothing worse than taking a split and then having it robbed out the next day. So what's the important thing? You take a split from a yard. Where do you put the split? Everywhere. In another yard. Right? Why not in their own yard? And why not in the same yard? Right, so those bees that have flown before, the foraging bees that you did take across, simply go back to their parent hive and they go, hey, there's a really weak, unprotected hive back there, we'll go and rob it out. And it effectively gets robbed out very quickly. Okay, so splits go to another yard. Nukes go to another yard, and usually splits to another yard as well. Splits are a bit stronger, but usually to another yard. Now here's a good question. I split a hive, and I put a queen in the new one. I've got two boxes. Do I move the box with the new queen into the new yard, or do I move the box with the old queen into the new yard and put the new queen in its original place? Move the old. You're saying move the old queen? Yeah. There's no right answer. It's a trick question. Because we could argue all day about that one. And for different reasons, there are different answers. So I don't want people to lose stress over it. The gentleman made a very good point. He's saying that if you take the old queen away, her laying is not interrupted. She'll continue laying, and it's probably the better of the options, to be honest. And so there's no interruption laying. A new, particularly a queen cell, there's an interruption of a couple of weeks. But during that period, you've still got plenty of food coming in because the foraging bees are going back to the original hive location. But it was just a bit tricky, yeah. Just stand by and grab your mic. It's all right, Paul, I got this.
Right. If you create a nuke with capped brood and the pollen stores and the honey stores and a feeder,
Yeah.
it's got no foraging bees in it.
Yeah.
Why can't you just stick that in the same yard?
Because it still gets found by bees from other hives, and it's weak. It's because it's the older bees that guard as well. So it's, yeah, not, yeah. So, well, the two gentlemen just debated it. It's quite, they're both right. By saying that you can leave them in the same yard. Yes, you can if there's a good nectar flow on, and you're having a lot of spare foraging bees looking for food. But if there's no nectar flow going on and you do that, those foraging bees who can't find food will go and find food anywhere, and it'll be that weak hive. And so your losses will be up there. You might get away with it sometimes, but as a basic rule, it's not a good way. Okay. Particularly during splits in autumn, you're going to lose a lot of them that way. Alrighty. So well protected. Close your nukes down, take them away, close them right down, close your splits down as well. Right? Anything that's weakened through your action or just naturally, make sure you protect them and close them down. Make sure they're disease-free. You know the disease status of every hive you split or take nukes from. Really important. The last thing you want to be doing is spreading it, well, no, that's the second to last thing. The last thing you want to be doing is selling it. Right? I get really angry with people who sell disease gear. That's very unprofessional. And we've all got stories of people who've done it to us.
What do you mean closing them down? Just shutting the hole?
Reducing. They still need. So if you've got, let's say you've just got a split and you've got a normal entrance, okay, and you're a hobbyist or you're a commercial operator. Hobbyist. Okay. So you grab some grass and stuff it in till there's only about a gap out that big, and if you've got a vent in your hive mat, flip that over. And so that's closed it down. It meant that instead of having to protect an area this big, the guard bees only have to protect an area this big, and are much more effective at doing so. Yeah. Sorry, if I use a term that you don't understand, don't sit there and wonder. Please ask, because we're in the habit of that. Who knows what a dead out is? I was going to ask him. Okay, does anyone not know what a dead out is? Okay, so a dead out is a hive you come back to and found the colony is gone, it's dead. Okay, empty boxes. We're terrible, those of us in the industry, are using terminology and assuming you all know what it is, and that's not the case. So please pull us up about it.
Just with the nukes and splits, would you put them all in like a separate yard altogether, or would you like several nukes all in one yard, or would you?
Yeah, so if I've got weak hives, I try and put them all in the same yard. Try and create physical distance between strong hives and weak hives. Yeah. So I usually will go around or make up a trailer load full of splits, and they'll all go into a yard with this, which is separate, but you do want to be reasonably close to other bees because you need the drones from those other hives for mating, but not so close that they can immediately see them and roll them out. Okay, so we are well fed, well protected, disease free, sited with good access to food, drones, and protection from elements, and well done, you preempted that for us, and well protected from attack. The splits and nukes are by definition weaker than your normal production hives. So that's important. So do it right, and then look after them. They're an investment, and you want them, and they become a probability thing. All right, so because you're interested in a new queen and you're hoping that she gets out and gets mated under most circumstances, so you've got to make sure you up your chances. All these little things will make a difference at the other end. They will add to the chances of your success. Okay, so do those little things right. So what are the advantages and the disadvantages of splits and nukes? Basically, splits being the full box, etc., and nukes being the small ones. All components for a split, for example, all components are the same size, so you can put a top feeder on. A bath feeder. So you're using full-size gear, or you could do a three-quarter split if you wanted, but you're basically using full-size bee gear. So you'll be able to then use any other full-size gear on a split. Whereas the nuke's in a little half-size box, and so you're restricted to buying frame feeders and that sort of thing. So having a commonality in the gear size is important and advantage. Splits can be planned and prepared for well in advance. So it's not so much an activity you're responding to for weather conditions, etc. I run basically a hive production outfit. I make up new hives for people, and I can plan my operations basically by calendar. I can't so much plan the queens getting mated, but I can pretty much plan when I'm going to do the splits and all that sort of stuff. So it puts much more predictability into your beekeeping. And for that reason alone, some of you people might want to consider it as a commercial operation. And I'll explain a bit more that later on. Splits are generally stronger than a nuke, no doubt about it. They're more resilient to fluctuations in weather, so they're not so susceptible to the cold. Why? There's more bees in there. Right? A lot more bees. You've got 9 frames of bees probably in that box rather than just 4. And they contain more food, obviously. Holding more bees is there's more advantages again, but primarily the secret to bee success is the fact they're thermoregulators, aren't they? And Kim talked about how important that was before. Bees can thermoregulate. They cluster together and maintain a temperature of about 34 degrees Celsius within the cluster or within the hive. So if it gets too hot, gets over that, they disperse the cluster and they send bees out to fan air through, etc. So they are thermoregulators. That's the success to their, or the reason for their success. So when we do splits and nukes, we've got to bear that in mind and make sure temperature, we understand temperature is an issue. So splits are more resilient, obviously, to fluctuations in temperature. They're more resilient to attack. Why? There's a lot more bees. Same reason. And a lot more of those will be older bees, foraging and guard bees. And they're a lot more resilient to starvation. Why? Because instead of having one frame of pollen and one frame of honey, they've got multitude frames of those. So yeah, they're not so bad. The problem, so yeah, it's a bit of a advantage. How are we going for time, Kim? Oh, good. Okay, I'm going to, all right, yeah, I'm going to, anyone have any questions about splits and nukes? I'm going to finish it much there. Yes, someone, you run a microphone to.
Sorry, I was just curious about what are your ideas on making splits after you've taken honey off?
Good time, because you've got plenty of bees with not much to do except help you. So they can be, their activities can be generated to things like making wax, and if they're the right age, etc., doing that sort of stuff. So you have a lot of excess bees who would otherwise be starved off, and now they can work for you in doing similar things. So after honey comes off, if you've got no other crops come in, good time to make a split. Yeah. Other good advantage of a split, of course, is it's a great way of depopulating a hive, isn't it? If you've got swarming issues around September, or no, not for me, October, November, swarming issues, and you're having trouble, and particularly if it's a remote yard and you're not there as often as you'd like to be there, depower it, take out frames of brood, make up a split, put in frames of foundation and feed it. Okay? Depowers that hive, reduces the chance of swarming.
Can I just make one other comment about the autumn splits? If you're going to be requeening all your cells with a protected queen cell anyway, it's a great time to make splits because you don't have to find your queens. You just split it in half and put a queen cell into both halves.
Yep.
Nice and easy.
Everyone understand what a protected queen cell is? No.
Oh, there's another one.
A protected queen, basically you have a queen cell off the bottom of a cup. That's where we buy our queens normally. And if you were to wrap tin foil or put a bit of hose pipe, short bit of garden hose pipe, or a bit of tape, or buy one of the specialist queen cell protectors, it stops the existing queen coming, eating through the side of the cell and stinging the new one to death, right? And that's a protected queen cell. If you put a protected queen cell into a hive, it's mostly what we do commercially, then the virgin queen hatches out through the bottom. She can get out through the bottom through the trapdoor, and she will quickly hunt down and kill the old girl. And that's how we do most of our requeening. So most operations, a lot of operations, we put about protected queen cells into about half our hives every year, and then the other half the next year, right? And that's where we keep our queens young. So what Paul's saying is, and he wanted to make a split. He had two. He split them. He didn't care which one the queen was in because he put a protected cell in both and doesn't have to find the queen. Good solution. Yep. Yeah. You don't care then. You just
lazy man stuff.
All right. Okay. I'm going to briefly.
One more question here.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Just wanted to know, once you've done a split or nuke, how long before it needs to have a queen?
If you don't introduce a queen within sort of 24 hours, or even within a number of hours, they will start, if they are able to, if the cells, the correct larvae are available, they'll start making emergency cells. Okay? But if you have no brood of no eggs in there and no brood of less than a day or so, then they can't do that, and so you have a much longer period. But the longer you leave that hive without a queen in there, be it cell or a mated and caged queen, the greater the chances of rejection by that hive. Okay, so we want to get the queen in there as soon as we can.
I find a good idea when you're making nukes, have your cells, when you're making nukes up, have your cells ready as soon as you make them, whack them in,
Yep.
and it's a pretty safe way to do it.
Yep.
I even protect them then because sometimes you can't find her. And you've taken her upstairs with you. Bad luck.
That period of time where a colony, whether it be a split or a nuke or a hive, can smell the new queen while she's protected, whether she be in a cage or in a cell, is a really important period of time. Right? That's why you can't just walk in the front door under normal circumstances, right? Because the workers have not got used to her scent and they will ball her up and chuck her out. So it's that delayed release that's very important. Yep. That's right, yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you what, you can come and ask me any number of questions you like. I'm down there at the AFB stand. I'll be there all week, or I'll hang around here a bit later on, and I'm more than happy to answer all your questions. Because I know you'll have some specific ones in it, and it's pretty awful trying to get it all done quickly. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is risk mitigation for you, and because I think it'll be beneficial. Risk mitigation is just understanding and reducing the risks you face as you get into beekeeping. And I'm trying to save you from getting wiped out, essentially. Probably more beekeepers get wiped out than successfully make it commercially. That probably wouldn't be a true untrue statement, right? So what I want to do is at least make you think about a few things and improve your chances. So what you need to do is understand the risks related to your operation. Your operation is going to be different to my operation and everyone else's operation. You know what you want to do, but you need to understand those risks. You need to come up with a plan to avoid or to mitigate those risks. Otherwise, avoid them completely, or understand them and reduce the impact they have on you and what you're trying to do. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Right? Don't be so specialised that you can get wiped out by a relatively small change in circumstances. Don't give up your day job. Right? I seriously mean that. There's probably hardly any of us commercially here who have transferred, who didn't hold on to our day job for as long as possible. It sustains your new activity. Right? It just sustains all those unintended, unexpected costs. Okay? Keep your day job, your initial job, as long as you can, and transition. Don't just leap from one to the other if you can help it. So transition to commercial, don't leap to it. Think outside the square. Right? And probably the one thing I advise you not to do is go into bulk honey production. Why? Because everyone down there, well, not everyone, but a lot of people down there are doing bulk honey production, and a lot of them are very good at it. And they have the advantages of being there first and doing huge economies of scale and having workers and all sorts of things ahead of you guys. So if you think you're going to compete with the big operators for Manuka or white clover or whatever, you'd have to be pretty clever. Okay? Unless you already have some existing advantage, like you've got the land. If you have, you're very clever. Okay? But unless you hold that advantage already, then if you think you're going head-to-head for honey sales with the big commercial guys, you're going to find it difficult. Can you produce a crop and sell it to some profit? You probably can, you know, but you're going to be a price taker, not a price maker, essentially. Those big guys are chasing the markets, tying them up and doing everything they can to ensure their survival. So it makes life a bit more difficult to you if you want to compete with them head-to-head. All right, is that the end of it? Hell no. There are lots of other opportunities, and I want to and need to open your eyes to some of them. So what do you think about if you can't do bulk honey? Think about comb honey. Comb honey is extremely valuable, you know. $600 a box was one price I heard a year or so ago. Good quality comb honey, right? Sorry?
What about tooting? How do we get on there?
Well, you've got to understand if tooting's a risk in your area, not do it at the time, obviously. But comb honey, all right, is an option as opposed rather than just extracted honey. Okay, and it's a high return for quantity. Medicinal honey, if you want to do medicinal honey, you can perhaps talk Paul, but he runs far less hives than you'd expect of a normal commercial operator. Bulk honey, why? Because he's got a high value product. He's got medicinal Manuka. Okay, so same amount of effort, much bigger return. If you want to run head-to-head with the big guys, you need a lot of staff with bulk honey, but you don't need a lot of staff. Paul has primarily been a one-man outfit for a number of years. He has a work every now and again, or used to, for a couple of days a week. Something like that, was it Paul? Yeah, but primarily he's a one-man outfit and did okay. Boutique honey. Only you have the honey that comes from your place, if it's your place, okay? So if you know anything about marketing, you make that unique. You sell that as a unique thing, as your particular honey. You make up a story about it, not too big a story, but you make it sound really interesting and really desirable, and you sell it as that, as boutique honey. It's like a good wine, you know. Sorry, folks, there's only a few cases available, but it is superb, right? So add value to it that way. Look at pollen production, not pollination, but pollen production. as an option. If you're in an area with lots of shrubs, lots of bushes, lots of sort of stuff, pollen production is an option for you. Rent a hive, right? I told someone about this great business plan I had for Rent a Hive a number of years ago, and guess what he went and did immediately? Made me look silly. But Rent a Hive, a good idea, okay? Especially in urban areas. And I think, do you do better Rent a Hive? Yeah. So, sorry? You rent them out. You take them out to people and they have them in their backyards and you give them, I'm not sure what the business model that works for you and works for your area, but primarily you have a vested interest, both of you perhaps, or you give them some honey or whatever. So Rent a Hive is, you go and manage the hives and they like to help, and that's important. But Rent a Hive is one option. Queen rearing, get into queen rearing. So few people get into queen rearing, right? It's a bane of most people's lives trying to find a queen when you want one, isn't it? If there are a lot more queen rearers around, we'd be a lot better off. Okay, think about queen rearing. Hint: women make very good queen rearers. Right? I've run lots of courses over the years. Had lots of women come through that make exceptional queen rearers because of their good articulation, attention to detail. Pollination. Yeah, you can do pollination. Consultancy. Get to know about bees. Get to know what works, whatever, and advise others. Make it academic. Tuition. Right? Years ago, I could see the way things would go and on a bad year, and I decided that tuition was probably a good way to go. And I've made quite a nice little life out of tuition, okay? There were very few people who could teach you beekeeping when I started, and now I write courses and tuition to all sorts of things. So it doesn't have to be, and that still involves hands-on beekeeping. You can't be a good bee tutor without being a hands-on beekeeper as well, but you have an income right throughout winter where straight beekeepers don't. So tuition's a possibility. Even a skilled labour unit, right? You can hire yourself out and things. So what I'm saying is, don't be a sheep and follow the flock. Please think about what you can do best, right? What will work for you. Using resources you have available or that are realistically obtainable by you, think about how you can utilise them to do what you want to do in a way that suits you. You may not want to make millions out of it. You may just want to make a good little thing about it, but make it so that it doesn't require excessive amounts of effort, and make it so you enjoy it and get a reasonable return. Don't stumble into beekeeping as a vocation, really, or do you want to plan for it. And understand that the risks correspond to the type of beekeeping you want to do, right? So if you want to do queen rearing, understand the risks of queen rearing, mitigate them, all right? Eliminate them, isolate them, minimise them. Well, that's not correct, they've changed these days, but understand what your risks are and reduce them or get rid of them if you can. So I'll talk very quickly, we only got 5 minutes, is it? Yep, 5 minutes. I'm going to talk quickly about some examples of those things just to help you a little bit. Examples of risk mitigation. Honey production. Let's say we're into honey production, right? What are the risks of honey production? Number one, give me the most obvious risk of honey production. No honey, why no honey? Bad weather, okay? So if you're in the honey production, you're thinking bad weather, what's going to happen if I have bad weather? Okay, if you've made no allowance for bad weather and you have no crop, you can get wiped out, okay? So bad weather's a risk. What do you do about bad weather? Disperse your hives, go to different types of ground, different geographical areas, okay? Reduce that exposure, that one-off exposure. All right, different types of ground produce different nectars at different times, etc., and are subject to different weather patterns. Utilise different product income streams. Okay, don't sort of say it's honey only. If you're subject to being wiped out by weather in the critical months of just January or whatever, if you've taken a crop of propolis and a crop of pollen before then and taken a bush crop in December, then you're not totally wiped out. You might have enough to get you through. Okay, so use everything at your disposal, not just the one crop. Wax propolis, bees themselves, make up some new hives and sell those. Pollen queens, they're all good income streams if you can get it. Have vehicles and equipment that suit you and operate in bad weather. I talked about that before, right? Make sure if you've got hives dispersed over farmers' paddocks, you've got a vehicle that can get to them, and so in bad weather, you're not stopped from getting to them and feeding them, okay? Because if you didn't feed them and weren't able to, you get wiped out because they're all starved. Bad markets, they're another one issue. Diversify your honey types, both floral and comb, etc. Extend the length of your production season through targeting different crops. Switch to selling bees if the market's because the markets used to fluctuate terribly in years gone past. Recognise the situation early and look for temporary income streams outside of beekeeping. Go independent, develop your own markets. Okay? For every problem, there are solutions, but you do need to understand the problem and think about the solutions. Disease pests, regularly check for diseases, so you don't get wiped out by disease. When Varroa came through, a lot of beekeepers were shooting from the industry because they did not change. So you've got to make sure you do. Checking for disease is not wasted time going through hives. It absolutely is not. It's really important because if you get disease set into your outfit, it'll wipe you out as quick as anything else. Good procedures and plans in place to contain and eliminate disease, they're important. Understand that disease will turn up, whether you want it to or not, it will turn up. Right? No one's immune from it. Treat intelligently for Varroa and reduce stress to your hives, right? By reducing interest. Do all the things that bees need to do. Feed them well, look after them well, love them, talk to them. I don't care what you do, but look after your bees. Without your bees, you're not a beekeeper. Alrighty? Question in the back.
Just one thing it's been probably said before, if you're going into beekeeping, don't go along to your bank manager. He might be a great friend when he gives you the loan, but after you don't keep your payments up, he becomes your number one enemy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My advice, just if you can, when I talk about transitioning into beekeeping, do it on your own back. So don't buy in a whole lot of hive, just increase your hive numbers, etc., and use your other income streams to get to the stage where basically the beekeeping starts producing enough income that one day you find you're switched over. Yes, sorry.
Okay, we might have some questions afterwards. What I just want to do, we've got a couple more minutes to finish. What I'd like is, I've got a summary, and then I think if we can have a summary from the three of us as well, what is really important, and questions will be here throughout the few days. So very quickly, and I just want to bring up what I've got available if you want to come and look at it down at the GIA stand, is the advantages and disadvantages of the two different seasons, the spring and the autumn. If you want to come and see that further, please come down to the GIA stand. The other one is that queens come in cells, which a lot of commercials find very economical, and we can also get unmated queens and caged queens. Now there is a difference in, of course, laying and when they will lay, because some of them have to go through their mating periods. So again, if you want to see a little bit about that or ask us, we're here over the next few days. Some of the specialties like higher hives, I can help you with that if you want to. And then otherwise, I just want to go on to the future. All right, basically, our future, we've come here today, but there's always learning. We can continue to learn. So where can you continue to learn after conferences? There's club days or clubs, you can join them. Newsletters, clubs have newsletters. APNZ has a newsletter. There's forums as well. Reading. There's lots of books out there, but there is the Bible we have here in New Zealand, which is Practical Beekeeping. If you are reading books from other sources, like overseas, be aware of the calendar difference, but also of those pests and diseases. What we have or what they have, we might not have. So you've got to be very aware of that. Watch New Zealand-based videos. I think on the forum, the New Zealand Beekeepers Forum, there's quite a bit there you can watch. Read again in different areas is going to be different. Talk to beekeepers. Of course, you're going to get 10 different answers. Just remember your bees are pretty forgiving. You can try one answer, and if that doesn't work, the next season you could try a different answer. But the biggest thing is always be willing to change. So don't write... Oh, sorry. Oh, I think we were too close. Don't write one recipe, I'm going to have this management in place and that's all I'm going to do. Going back to reading your hive, if they need something else done to them, be willing to make a change to address that. Now, of course, the other one, support APNZ. APNZ is here to support you, so support them. Becoming registered as a beekeeper for their membership is very important. So that's the future. My summary is basically change and read your bees and your hive. Paul, what would be yours?
Okay, there's a few little things I'd like to say. I sort of, in the middle of my talk, I thought I was running behind time, and actually I wasn't. I'd like to sort of just do a little bit more on splits, because it really is the key to increasing your hive numbers. But even once you've actually got up to your 300 or 400 hives or whatever you want to maintain, what you'll find is in the spring, in a good spring, you will need to split, because we talked about swarming, and the aim with splitting in the spring is twofold. One is to increase your hive numbers. The other one is you're splitting as swarm control. Now you should be very, very clear in your own mind what you're doing it for. It might be for both. Once you've got up to your hive numbers, you're really only splitting, unless you want to sell hives, you're really only splitting for swarm control. And what you're trying to do with swarm control is, remember the blue line that we had that went over in the lovely big arc? You've got hives that are ahead of that line. You're trying to bring them down to the line. You're not trying to let them swarm so that they actually go way, way, way behind the line and take a lot to catch up. So you're actually just trying to bring them back to that line, the same as the hives that are below the line that you're trying to build up. So when you're looking at making splits, my policy used to be, if I'd go around with the students and we would count the number of frames in a hive. If it was a double and had 18 or more frames of bees, we would take either 2 nukes or we'd take a full box split off. If it was 15 to 17, we might just take a nuke out of it, and that's swarm control. That's bringing it back down to the line. Because I'm talking about September here. That's trying to bring it down to not much more than the box of bees, so it's got room to expand. If you're doing splitting because you want to increase your hive numbers to the absolute max, well, you may go a bit lower than that. You may actually go to 2 hives and take a nuke, a frame of honey and a frame of brood out of 2 hives to make up the 4 or 5 frames that you're going to need. Okay, so that's just a bit on splitting. To really increase the hive numbers, as I said, you should be probably looking at making nukes rather than full box hives. So say, let's just take 10 as an example. Say you've got 10 doubles that you can split. You can take off 10 singles. Now, you're doing well. You'll get 80% of them mated and laying. Sometimes you might do better, but a lot of times you'll do worse. If you, out of those same 10 splits, if you had enough nuke boxes, you could take 20 nukes. Now you've got 20, you get 80% of that is what, 16 laying? Okay, and the ones that aren't laying, if you've got 2 nukes side by side, you just join them up and you've got a single. So what have you lost? You've ended up with 16 rather than probably 8. So yeah, that was just a few little things. Oh, one other thing about shifting nukes to another site. My policy's always been, when you get them to the new site, you're opening them up. You can't wait till night time to open them up. Stuff a bit of grass into the entrance, so that wet grass, so that it'll dry out and come out in the next day or so, and the bees will escape slowly. Even better than that, I've found in the last few years, I've been using toilet paper. But not on a wet day, it gets soggy and the bees have trouble with it working it on a soggy day. But toilet paper, just shoved in loosely, and I make my nukes up 1, 2 or even 3 days ahead of when I'm going to be putting the cells in them. It makes it nice and easy when you come around to put the cells in. And so you can always open the entrance up a bit more than if either the grass or the toilet paper hasn't come out. Anyway, yeah, that's...
So before Bryce does his summary, before Bryce does his summary, I'm just going to quickly push in there. You need to be aware how to collect a swarm. That's part of beekeeping. All right. So swarms we try and manage to avoid it, and especially if you're living in a urban area, you need to either consider requeening annually to try and avoid swarms, or do those management practices that are every 10 days. But swarms going off into urban, somebody else's house or somebody else's yard is not a good thing. But otherwise, if they do, everybody needs to either know how to collect a swarm or get somebody else to collect it. And the other piece of equipment I find important is to have nuke boxes around, not just beehives, even if you're only going to keep 1 or 2 beehives.
I'm not going to give you a summary, I'm just going to give you a bit of advice. Don't get so big, people, that you get so busy you don't enjoy your bees. Right? Enjoy your bees, you'll enjoy beekeeping, and you'll stay with it. Okay? I'd love to see you with the next conference after. Thank you very much for your attention. Really do appreciate it.